Hello everybody, this is the Vikstrand. The movie of today is directed by George A. Romero and it's written by Stephen King, a true clash of titans when it comes to, horror and stuff like that. This movie kind of feels like the pilot for a TV show. Now, it eventually became a TV show in 2019, so better late than never, I suppose. Now, one of the reasons this movie works as well as it do is the fact that if you would have taken the story of one of the 5 stories in the Creepshow movie and you would have tried to extend that to a full-length feature film, it would not have fly. It wouldn't have made sense and it wouldn't have fitted. And it would have made, a bad movie. But, shortening them down and making them into 5 smaller stories, that worked. Let's take a look at how good they are, shall we? This is the movie The Creepshow. As I said, Creepshow is 5 short stories tied together with the intro and the outro with the comic book obsessed kid and his slightly abusive father. And I will not work this as my normal review because I will take each individual segment, rate them and come up with an average rating for the entire movie. Everybody good? Goody. Let's go, shall we? The first story, Father's Day, is basically a not very good Italian zombie horror movie. It's fine. It's really unnerving to see Ed Harris with hair. That's the scariest thing in the entire thing, I think. Otherwise, this is a pretty easily forgettable but sort of enjoyable little segment. The second part of the movie, The Loneliest Death of Jodie Verrill, is basically more of a Lovecraftian story with some spliced in parts of Color Out of Space into it, just for the sake of it, where Stephen King himself plays the titular character, who is basically the most unlucky redneck in the history of ever. I don't know if he was supposed to be a redneck, but he came across as it, and this was kind of fun, this was kind of silly. It was not very, scary or intimidating, but most of the sequences in this movie was more, traditionally a little bit funnier than it should have been, and it was a bit too much over the top in some cases. But this was still funny, this was still entertaining, and it was still fascinating to see. However, it is the third part of the movie that I think is the absolute best one. Something to Tide You Over is an Hitchcockian story in which Leslie Nielsen plays a man who discovers that his wife is having an affair and is going to do something rather terrible and horrible stuff. And he was actually really scary. Nothing of the deadpan Fanny Leslie Nielsen in this one. Nothing of the funny stuff at all. He was just frightening and scary. This was the best story by far because it was the simplest, because it featured less humor than the other ones, even though they kind of went a little bit overboard in the end with the supernatural stuff, but it was okay. This might also be one of the first movies I've ever seen that features, security cameras and stuff like that. I don't know if it was the first one, but it was definitely one of the first movies I have seen where they have used, security cameras as a part of a movie. The fourth part of Creepshow is The Crate, which is more of a Universal monster movie in which Hal Holbrook finds, a crate that has come from a Antarctic expedition, and there is something in it that is not very nice to people. And this is the movie where I think it was most apparent that they should have had more gore in this one. I am usually against having, lots of gores in horror movies because gore isn't scary. Atmosphere is scary. Gore isn't. But this is the movie where they should have, gone balls out and went all of, pumping blood out and basically covering people in it. That would have been fun. Instead, this movie went on about 10 to 15 minutes too long and it dragged it down with it. It wasn't bad. Hal Holbrook was good and he is basically sidelined with one of the bitchiest wives I've ever seen in a movie ever. I don't know if I've ever found a single person in the history of cinema that has been so unlikable as Billy, you know, his wife. I wanted her dead the second I saw her. She was so fucking awful. Oh my god. The fifth part, Creeping Up on You, takes place in an apartment where a guy in a very, very high-tech apartment who hates bugs and, you know, has paranoia and stuff like that, is controlling his vast empire by basically being a dick to people. He cuts Jim Cornette level promos on people he doesn't like, and he's very mean, and it's kind of funny. And it's kind of entertaining, but it's also not the strongest thing. Together, these 5 stories doesn't really create a narrative that, you know, leads us from A to B to C to D. It basically is first this story, then this story, then this story, then this story. And they have nothing to do with each other, but I don't really mind it that much because, as I said, if you would have taken, you know, Creeping Up on You, The Crate, or, you know, Father's Day, and trying to make a feature-length film out of it, it wouldn't have worked. It would have been sucky. It would have been terrible. It would have been awful. But in this case, now you know, if you think that one segment is, you know, running a little too long and you're not really into it, then, you know, we're gonna have a new segment soon and it might be better. And that is one of the reasons why I think this movie works so well as it does. The acting is fine. There are no really big jump scares or really big, you know, gore moments or really big, you know, tension-grabbing sequences, except for the Leslie Nielsen segment, which is the best thing in the entire movie. If you are a hardcore movie fanatic, you will not like this movie very much. It's more of cozy horror rather than, you know, gory and over-the-top horror. The movies are inadvertently a little bit too funny for their own good, but this movie is kind of entertaining, and it has moments in it that I think is really, really clever, and there are moments in it that is really, really dumb. But in the end, this is a movie I don't regret seeing, which is more than I can say for most horror movies I see. I like the format, I like the stories, and I like the fact that they are so short as they are. This is a classical horror movie, but the jump scares and the gore are kept to a pretty low. Father's Day gets 39 points, The Lonesome Death of Jodie Verrill gets 57 points, Something to Tie You Over gets 66 points, The Crates gets 48 points, They Are Creeping Up on You gets 51 points, which makes Creepshow as a total gets 52 points. It's classic early 80s cheese. There are some nice moments. There are very few moments that are legit scary, except the Leslie Nielsen part. But it is pretty harmless, and there are moments in it that I think is pretty clever. Even though I think they could have shortened this movie and just tightened up the crate section a little bit. So I'll see you next time from, well, so and so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.